From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Here's what's ahead. On the grain markets, K-State's Dan O'Brien. He'll look at the current corn-to-soybean price ratios at the leading delivery points around Kansas as row crop planting time nears, and Dan will comment on the market impact of the E-15 ethanol sales approval for this summer. Then, a visiting agricultural economist here at K-State from Ukraine, Antonina Broyaka, will offer first-hand insight on grain production in that now war-torn country, how the conflict is likely to impact that productivity going forward, and the repercussions for world grain trade. And standing by to cover Kansas agricultural weather, K-State's Chip Redmond. All that straight ahead on Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network, and you're listening to Agriculture Today. Welcome to our Friday edition. Dan O'Brien stands by once more to get into the grain market scene. He is grain market economist, K-State Research and Extension, based in Colby, Northwest Kansas. Several things to get into today, Dan, but we want to begin with a quick nod to a webinar that you were a presenter in earlier this week, and it was on the Russia-Ukraine situation, the agricultural ramifications. You and a guest speaker who hails from Ukraine, Antonina Broyaka, took on the topic, and very interesting. We're advising people, before we go any further, to go back and look at the video of that.
Yes, some of the feedback we had from other seasoned economists outside of Kansas State were acknowledging how high quality, in some cases superior, the information was that Antonina had presented. And it was very difficult to get much more than to just generalized observations of what might be there from people that weren't from in-country. Well, Antonina has been in-country, and she gave a very complete description of where crops were grown, where military conflict had probably done major damage to infrastructure. Talked a fair amount about rail transportation in the country, the availability of crop inputs, the ability of Ukraine to still export through ports, which is limited, and also of the potential to export by rail to Europe, to the West. So a lot of things talked about, and we're just very fortunate to have, at this point in time, someone with such real-time knowledge and background in that area to be able to describe the situation. For my part, to add in at the end, our latest understanding anyway of potential impact on world wheat, world corn, world oilseed oil markets as they're affected by Ukraine. And I think one thing to remember is that before all this happened, Ukraine was referred to as the breadbasket of Europe for a good long time, for decades or more. So to not have that country being able to produce agricultural goods that the world has grown to rely on is a major factor in markets, and not the only thing affecting the inflation and run up in grain prices across the board that we're seeing, but it's certainly an important one.
It was an insightful session. There's no doubt about that. And we have lifted highlights from Antonina's comments, which we will present after we're done right here, Dan. Folks should stay tuned for that and check out the video of the entire session. Very good watch at agmanager.info. Now, to the market action this week at the local Kansas elevators. And you're shaking your head with, what, amazement?
Well, we just haven't seen anything like this. At least I haven't in my lifetime now in this type of a position. Now, we've seen major run-ups, of course, during the 2012 drought, the summer of 2012. 2007, 2008, we'd seen a major run-up in the spring-summer months in commodities. During Chernobyl, again, involving Ukraine in years past, we saw a one-time quick spike and then a quick drop-off once we learned the true extent of what the risk was and damage was. So at least we can say that now we're at another time of tremendous price inflation. And we've seen, following the prospective plannings report released by the USDA on March 31st, we've seen corn futures up almost every day since then. I think there was one day when it wasn't. But when you look at the chart movement for D's corn, you see that going higher. You November soybeans have held their own, but they haven't been running up the same way. It sure seems like, given the results of that report from the USDA, that the general market has seen fit to try to bid for corn acres. And when you look at the ratio of new crop bids across Kansas, the first thing you notice is that, wow, what a bunch of variability. But I just kind of say the relative prices for new crop bids for about 6 locations across the state and what the ratio is. And remember, a neutral bid is about 2.3, and 2.3 ratio of November futures for soybeans to December futures for corn. When you look at Colby, starting in northwest Kansas, a new crop bid for soybeans at $13.97, for corn $7.20, a ratio of 1.94 favoring corn. Then you go to Salina, north central part of the state, central, north central. New crop bid $16.47 is what I had seen listed off of DTN for fall delivery. $16.47. New crop corn $7.16, a ratio of 2.3. So that's almost neutral. But that's a strong bid for soybeans. When you look at Topeka, $14.52 as a bid for beans, $7.05 as a harvest bid for corn, 2.06 favoring corn. Then you go to Garden City, $14.07 for soybeans in Garden City, and $7.65 for corn. By far and away the best bid as far as the region goes in the state, a ratio of 1.84. Clearly favoring corn in Garden City and Colby. Hutchinson and Columbus, both with ratios of about just right around 2. They're also favoring corn right now as opposed to that. And of course, a lot of that's affected by whatever basis these local elevators bring to corn, and then the run up in these corn futures relative to November soybeans. So we've got this, but yet we're coming into a season where almost nowhere in the state, maybe a few places in the south or southeast corner, we have a little bit of corn planted, maybe. We are in April, we're mid-April, so it's going to start to happen in earnest here. But in the midst of trying to get crops in, trying to have adequate inputs, top dressing nitrogen, if we still need to do that, whatever we have to do, we're looking at a lot of economic incentive in Kansas anyway, in most areas of the state, to increase corn acres over what had been projected in that March 31st prospective plannings report by the USDA.
We're getting ever so closer to those final decisions on acreage to be planted to what, and we'll watch very closely. You are also tracking what's happening with the ethanol market, and with that announcement that E-15 ethanol sales would be allowed through the summer, that is being reflected very much as well in the markets.
And again, Kansas stands out. There's a daily USDA ethanol report that comes out. The one for yesterday showed the low bid in Kansas at ethanol plants for corn is 803.5. The high bid, 813. There is one higher bid, top end in Illinois, but then the low bid there is 766. So overall, as far as the range of bids in Kansas, we have the strongest corn bids at ethanol input gates that you'll see anywhere in the country. And when you look at what's happening in the distillers' grain market, Nebraska and Kansas, both pretty high. I should say, of course, Nebraska ethanol bids also strong too. A big issue that to look at would be the cost of ethanol, the price of ethanol. And it seems that we're going sideways, had gone a little bit lower, now coming up higher. Reading news out of ethanol plants and from the Energy Information Agency, that stock's being drawn down a little bit, probably in anticipation of E-15 adoption this summer. So clearly, we're scrambling in a lot of ways economically in the energy and ag sectors. A lot of inflation. We're not casting aspersions as to what caused it right now, or do we just have it? There's a real challenge in coming months to take very scarce commodities and at high prices, put them through both food and fuel uses, and then come out with something that's affordable for consumers at the end.
And to the scarcity of the grains, the dry weather around the world, not just here in the Central Plains, we're all too well acquainted with that, but there are significant dry weather issues around the globe, and that's just adding to the complications as far as available supply.
Yeah, you just kind of click through them. The latest international ag reports coming out of the USDA Office of the Chief Economist, indicating Western Soviet Union, mostly dry, but rain far south and north, and that's affecting Ukraine, that's affecting Russia. So pretty dry conditions there. Northwest Africa, historic drought in Morocco. That's driving them to try to buy wheat during a time when it's pretty tough to do so. Middle East, warm but mostly dry. We're hearing of drought effects in Turkey. South Asia, seasonably hot and dry, affecting interior India and Pakistan. India is one of the countries that we're counting on globally to make up the difference in wheat supplies that the Black Sea issues have cut short. East Asia, hot, dry, weather-stressed crops, and that's a bullseye right on China. There's talk earlier of their wheat crop suffering from this. Australia, they have too much rain in the eastern part, and we've seen that happen before when they've flooded out harvests. So again, Australia being counted on to generally have a good wheat crop to help the world get through this situation, and they're getting too much rain now. And in South America, generally reports of, well, it says drier weather developed in central Brazil. We've had dry weather in Argentina. So we have dry conditions to go along with these supply disruptions that are occurring. And because of that, you go over the futures, you see May corn closed yesterday at $7.90, Dees $7.35, May soybean $16.82, and November at $15. Hard red winter wheat, May $11.54, July $11.57. So these are levels of prices that just 4 or 5 months ago we'd have been shocked to find ourselves here, but now we're here and we're high all across the board on all of them.
We would also note that Dan, in his weekly notes this week, has his latest price probability projections for the various grains. We have not time to get into those in detail today, but we direct you to those notes at agmanager.info. Have a look. Dan, lots going on. Appreciate the overview. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.
On the grain markets, K-State Research and Extension, grain market economist Dan O'Brien, and this is Agriculture Today. Agriculture Today continues now, and again, several hundred participants from 30 states and 20 countries took in that webinar Wednesday on the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the ripple effects on world grain markets, hosted by K-State's Department of Agricultural Economics, and featured there someone who's very much an insider on this topic. She's currently a visiting professor here at K-State, previously a professor of economics at Vinnytsia National Agrarian University in Ukraine, Antonina Broyaka. And she offered a thorough overview of grain production and commerce in her country and illustrated Ukraine's stature in global grain trade, which has obviously been staggered by the Russian attack. She pointed out that agriculture is the leading contributor to Ukraine's gross domestic product, so what happens with ag there is of enormous economic consequence. And as she says here, crop production is dominant there.
In recent years, the structure of agricultural products is dominated by crop production. Its share ranges from 77 to 78%. Over the last 5 years, Ukraine has seen a declining trend in livestock. The livestock was only about 22%. The main crop for Ukraine are wheat, corn, and barley, and also sunflower. Wheat, corn, and barley amount 94% of cereal and leguminous crop, and their planting area, volume, and production and yields have constant growth trend. According to the data of State Statistics Service of Ukraine, in 2021, the country produced more than 32 million metric tons of wheat, what is almost 130% compared to 2020. The harvested area was more than 7 million hectares. The total volume of corn production in Ukraine in 2021 was 39 million metric tons. Ukraine had the highest production of sunflower seeds of any country in the world in 2021 crop year. During that time period, Ukraine produced around 17 million metric tons of sunflower seeds. Russia was the second producer of sunflower seeds worldwide, with a production volume of 15.5 million metric tons in 2021-2022 marketing year.
And again, Ukraine is a prominent presence in international grain sales, selling into several significant markets.
The main importers of Ukraine grain in a monetary terms are China, Turkey, the Netherlands, India, Spain, Indonesia. Export of four main products, sunflower oil, corn, wheat, and barley, to those countries brought to Ukraine budget more than $19 billion. Among grain, the main ones for Ukraine are corn, wheat, and barley. In 30 years of Ukrainian independence, due to growing competition, wheat and barley have become less profitable, which has reduced production by 16% and 40% respectively. In the same time, the export increased significantly. Corn shows the opposite trend. During the years of independence, its production has increased several times, which has allowed Ukraine to take an honorable place among the world leader in grain export. The share of Ukrainian wheat export in a global export for the last few years was 20%, to compare Russia up to 16%, corn 16%, Russia only 2%. All seeds become more profitable than grain crops, which lead to an increase in acreage and increase in production by several times. The main crops among all seeds for Ukraine are, of course, sunflower, and production increased 5 times. The majority of sunflower seeds are used to produce sunflower oil, which Ukraine ranks first in the world in terms of export. As a result of the 2021 season, Ukraine exported 5.75 million tons of sunflower oil. Most of the products was exported to the European Union, it's around 32%, India 32.5%, and China 15.3%.
And Antonina says that Ukraine's activity in global grain trade is one major reason why Russia chose to invade her homeland.
We can safely state the fact that Ukraine is a significant player on global grain markets. Consequently, one of the reasons from Russia invasion into Ukraine is obvious. Russia wants to establish control over the export of grain and other trade to Europe and other countries in order to continue to blackmail the world with its monopolistic position, not only in the fuel market, but also in the issue of food security. Russian-Ukrainian war will make significant impact on the global wheat market, but now it is very difficult to predict all the losses without knowing how many people or labor left Ukraine or suffered, how many infrastructure facility wrecked, how many hectares of agricultural crops were destroyed or occupied, would be able Ukraine to plant or harvest, etc. Currently, due to the war in Ukraine, farmers cannot start planting an area of 3.5 million hectares of agricultural land. 7.6 million hectares were sown with winter grain for the 2022 harvest, including 6.5 million under winter wheat. Unfortunately, military action in Ukraine is likely to lead to a significant reduction in the area available for harvesting. Many fields cannot be harvested physically. According to our estimate, the losses of winter grains can reach 41%, which corresponds to 3.1 million hectares. In the period from 2019 till 2021, the planted area under spring grains in Ukraine ranged from 7.5 to 7.8 million hectares. However, this year, the war and its consequences will lead to significant adjustment in the structure of sown areas. As of April 1st, the forecast for planting area on the spring grass was for 39%.
All in all, it is quite clear that the war in Ukraine is leaving an indelible mark on agriculture there and subsequently on global grain markets and food availability, in Antonina's view. For, as she notes, it will be a long while before her country can return to its pre-conflict agricultural output.
We can conclude that Russia's hostilities in Ukraine will have an extremely negative impact on the functioning of food system. This disruption of integrated supply chain of agricultural products and food products from primary producers to end consumers, as well as activates to create added value in the agri-industrial complex related to the production, processing, distribution, and consumption of food. Active hostilities are currently taking place in Kharkiv, Odessa, Zaporizhia, the region where most of the wheat is grown. On the aggregate, this factor will reduce grain yield, harvest, and exports. Hampered export of Ukraine products to foreign markets due to the blockade of Ukrainian ports by Russia. 60% of Ukraine's agricultural products are exported by sea, which will negatively affect primarily the countries that depend on food imports. The consequences will pose serious threats to global food security. They will lead to a future rise of world food prices, and world prices for wheat and grain may increase by a high 20% due to the war in Ukraine. So to maintain its leading position in the grain market and ensure its own food security, Ukraine needs global support for the supply of fuel, seeds, fertilizers, and the creation of safe export-import corridor. But above all, Ukraine needs peace.
Comments there from Antonina Broyaka, a visiting agricultural economist at K-State from Ukraine. These from a special webinar on the agricultural ramifications of the Russia-Ukraine conflict hosted by K-State Agricultural Economics on Wednesday. We'd encourage you to take in Antonina's entire presentation. It gives considerably more depth on this topic. You can view it now at agmanager.info, agmanager.info. This is Agriculture Today. Agriculture Today continues now. Of course, on a Friday, we catch up with K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond to get the very latest from the Weather Data Library at the University on Kansas agricultural weather. Well, Chip, we did earlier in the week have a weather system move through that provided some moisture relief, but woefully not enough for the general problems we have in Kansas, right?
Yeah, if you are in basically northeast Kansas or portions of central Kansas, you did not get any moisture. And even the moisture that was received in most places didn't match what the weekly averages are. So we still ended up with below average precipitation for the week. So spotty thunderstorms this time of year, and as we get further into the summer, are our biggest moisture makers, but they can also be very isolated and not very widespread. So we start to see bigger variances in precipitation over shorter distances, and that's what we saw with the system here this week.
We're hoping to break out of that mold, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But we'd be remiss if we didn't mention as well the wind situation, which, of course, has led to wildfire problems galore. And these are relentless. We've talked about this before, but that doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon, Chip.
Yeah, the windy spring. We keep getting these frontal systems coming through that are strong low pressure systems that combine with high pressure off to our east and or our west, and that creates big pressure gradients and a lot of wind. And so we've seen that obviously with the big system that we had come through this week. We saw wind gusts in excess of 60 miles an hour. Thinking back into March, we had average winds of about 1 to 2 mile an hour above average for the whole state. And that might not seem like a lot, but when you start looking at the peaks and valleys of the days, that makes those peaks much higher, and we're not getting quite as low with our winds at night either. We're not seeing as calm winds nearly as much at night. Yeah. And it's just darn windy. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's going to likely continue until we get to summer. As we keep getting intermittent systems, we're averaging around 1 to 2 storm systems a week. That's going to bring periods of wind and not a whole lot of relief, especially for folks out west that just seen a lot of blowing dust and dirt movement, and that's not ideal by any means.
Then the forecast for this coming week. There is a mention of possible precipitation. It's, likely limited in scope once again?
Well, precipitation is always possible. We just have to make it actually occur and make it over a widespread area. Unfortunately, widespread precipitation across the state does not appear likely through the week. There's some glimmer of hope maybe towards the end of next week, somewhere in that 22nd to 23rd time frame. There's another light shot of moisture possible on the 19th in the afternoon, but that's mostly for East Kansas. So we're stuck in a dry pattern, really, and I don't see anything big changing that. So below average precipitation is expected through at least the 22nd, then that period of a couple of days where we might see some moisture. Then to end out the month, we're looking at below average precipitation once again into May. We're really growing those deficits quickly. Temperature-wise, we're going to stay slightly cooler than normal through the weekend, and then we're going to warm back up early next week and stay warmer for most of the week, and then we're going to keep that trend of warmer temperatures likely through the end of the month. So we have really dry conditions out there, especially the western half of the state. We're still going to see cooler temperatures overnight, but with warmer temperatures, we're going to lose more surface moisture if we have any left, and we definitely see concerns with warmer than normal temperatures and below normal precipitation into May.
All right. We appreciate the word as always, Chip, and we will catch up with you again next Friday. Thanks, and have a good weekend.
Yep, you too.
Touching base there with Chip Redmond, meteorologist, K-State Research and Extension. And with that, our time is away for the week. Thanks for being along with us, and enjoy your Easter weekend. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.